In an age of machinery, gears, cogs, screens, diodes, and most recently, machine intelligence, humans indeed seem to be losing sight of what it means to be human. There is an ever-increasing push to move fast, save time, maximize productivity, summarize this, skim that, watch a short, watch a reel, make notes, all more things to do to ultimately do less. Has anyone considered that the mightiest of historical achievements were completed in an age bereft of modern convenience? Pen to paper, horse for travel, tomes of information, philosophical schools of thought, in-person groups. Therefore, I want to explore this decline through particular lenses of interest which will form a series of episodes on reclaiming the better life, in which we look backward to move forward. In this release, these will be language and communication. Take a moment to really consider this. I understand it is a precipitous request amidst this age, but I'm sure you can handle it. Not long ago, we used language with clear, formulated sentences and words appropriate to their particular context. Don't merely take my word for it, however. Here's a compilation from a gentleman named Joseph Saar, whose work I highly commend, who encapsulates this as well. And we have no affiliation with each other. However, he also understands the importance of language and communication.
Confident in the sanity and sobriety.
Is determined and cannot be deterred.
Wishing to whistle their way up the aisle. He had tremendous courage.
I will now add my twist. Consider the following examples.
Well, I don't believe that man ever will deviate from the original pattern of his being. I don't allow myself, for instance, to believe a thing just for the sake of believing it. But when there are sufficient reasons for a certain hypothesis, I shall accept these reasons, naturally. You know, there are these peculiar faculties of the psyche, that it isn't entirely confined to space and time. You can have dreams or visions of the future. You can see round corners and such things. Only ignorance deny these facts. It's quite evident that they do exist.
In the example of Carl Jung you just saw, note that he articulates himself with brevity, and yet his speech is also laden with meaning and wisdom. We'll move to the next example.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Toms. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about...
In the example of Malcolm X, note the words wherein and definitely. He used transitionary signals such as rather. He possessed appropriate inflection for a male, with a lowered pitch towards the end of his sentences, conveying power and authority. He maintained a calm disposition, but focused facial expression, demonstrating appropriate thought and consideration.
Shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free.
Now in the example of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, note the pacing of then, thenceforward, and forever free. If it weren't clear enough, it follows the rule of three. But now we're going to take an unfortunate turn to the present, and in doing so, it would not be remiss to state that the younger generation of today speak with a crippling emptiness. Most have lost the art of communication en masse. It would be rare to hear speech that did not consist of those abysmal verbal fillers. If you couldn't guess, I also seethe at hearing I don't know how to explain it. And by verbal fillers, I'm referring to these. But fast forward to today, and this is indeed the Western patois, particularly amongst the upcoming generation. Consider the following examples.
I think like the biggest thing that like annoys me in like the whole dating world is like f***ing talking stages. Like it's so annoying, like the whole like, and just like the inconsistency in them. Like I literally like hate that like so much. But I think that's like my biggest thing. It's just like
what specifically?
Just like the fact of just like you like, I don't know how to word this. like in like talking stages, and it's just like you're like labeled that, and it's like people like are considered like you can't like, you're just like confused, and like most of the time like the girl gets like attached or something, and they like see it like it's gonna lead to a relationship, and it's always not. And it's just like, that's like my biggest thing, is like I just hate the whole like how like talking stages are so like normalized. Like traditional dating does not exist in this generation.
In this example, a young woman uses the word like more than 40 times in a 1-minute video. And, my favorite, I don't know how to word this. Another example consists of a list of words, which I don't really consider words, but nevertheless have made it into the communication styles of the youth. These consist of the following. There are more, but I will omit the deafening profanity. On a tangential note, it's painful to also know that young boys and girls adopt this, as illustrated in the previous video. Note that my concern expressed here is only in respect of language. Health, nutrition, habits, and more deserve their own episode completely. But I'm sure young boys and girls vaping for pleasure and social acceptance is surely symptomatic of a societal collapse. Where did we go wrong? Is it not blatantly obvious? There is an increasing trend to favour expedience. And with expedience comes the disinterest in spending time deeply engrossed in a topic, a piece of literature, a piece of art, or in creative expression. But this is precisely where the magic happens. The hours engrossed in a book make you speak with a greater fluency, in a fashion akin to the author. The hours engrossed in a quality, pre-2000, trust me on that, film or documentary refreshes your worldview, polishing the glass that is your perception. The hours engrossed in one's craft, with commitment to enjoyment, improvement, and excellence, produces quality output. Again, it isn't just me who recognizes this. Consider the following examples. Example 1. The Art of Manliness published an article entitled, "What Happened to Our Mental Bandwidth?" And I couldn't concur more with what they wrote. Here are a few key extracts. Does it seem like people are more tired and less motivated and ambitious these days? People seem just to want to get through life rather than transcend it. They're more apt to aim low rather than aim for the stars. And perhaps the most important one, people are less inclined to set ambitious goals, initiate social interactions, pursue hobbies, and volunteer for service opportunities. Well, where does this stem from, you might ask? Well, one definite reason is technology usage, as the authors rightly note. We've become accustomed to the current state of our thoughts and behaviors being derived from fusing ourselves with our technology. Remember, it was only about a decade ago that they came about. While this isn't a new concept, it is worth reiterating because our societal strength depends on it. In our current state, when the electronic diodes searing light into our eyes switch off, so do we. We've siphoned ourselves of energy through technology, precipitating overstimulation and consequently bandwidth depletion. This state of depleted bandwidth permeates into other domains of life, as how you do anything is how you do everything. For example, why would you want to finish an assignment over 4 days if you can jolt yourself with TikTok right now? Or, why would you want to face the deeper repressed emotions causing you to search for quick dopamine if you can distract yourself with fleeting pleasure? The second example comes from Vizi, Andrei. This example reinforces the issue of technology-mediated depleted bandwidth through the lens of leisure. Consider the quotes of, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Mircea Eliade, which Andrei makes reference to in his 8th edition of The Sovereign Artist. Never before have there been so many automated, mechanized, commoditized entertainment products as we enjoy today. Modern amusements are designed to dominate your free time and integrate it into fake leisure activities. Much like myself, Vizi criticizes modern forms of leisure, such as scrolling TikTok, watching Netflix, playing video games, going shopping, or spending time at the mall. Him and I both consider these activities as antithetical to the traditional notion of leisure. To elaborate, consider Eliade once again. This kind of entertainment doesn't give you any free time, but rather takes it away. Mass-manufactured leisure activities turn you into a prisoner. The modern spirit boasts an oddly painful tendency to standardize even the most spontaneous human expressions. Eliade wrote the above in approximately 1934. Astonishing. The reason I reference the assault on leisure here is because traditional leisure allowed one to experience what I refer to as the 3 S's. Silence, stillness, solitude. Not only this, but it allowed one to experience, you guessed it, boredom. These 4 ingredients, in my opinion, are critical to the concoction of creative expression, art, and self-awareness. However, if we all have access to fragments of fun in our pant pockets to escape the brutality of boredom and sting of silence, how can we ever look inward to the jewels of our own insight? Further, how can we recalibrate our dopamine system and be comfortable with the 3 S's and boredom? Before I move on, I'd like to mention how I discovered the concept of the 3 S's. There's an interesting story behind it. It goes back to high school. During high school, we had a day that was dedicated to sport. We had the option of selecting the sport we wished to engage in. And in my time, I had a sport available. Keep in mind, sport available that was called Sydney Explorer, which basically meant that the students who selected that sport were to travel on a train to the city, have an hour to explore the city within a radius, meet back at a location, and come back. So, me at the time, who would take any opportunity to explore anything, enthusiastically and passionately selected that sport. And there was one day where we were at Circular Quay at the time, and I recall seeing a gentleman opposite the wharf who was busking, and his act was standing as a sort of statue, dressed in complete silver, glistening in the light, silver blazer, painted silver on his skin, silver top hat, silver shoes, silver pants. And I went up to the gentleman and I got into a conversation with him. I asked him a few questions and we naturally got speaking about the youth versus capitalizing on life, as you usually do when you meet buskers. And I don't recall exactly how it happened, but we managed to get onto the conversation of what he does with his life and how he enjoys it. And he said to me, listen, I'm just about to head to dinner with a couple of friends after this. I'm catching the ferry there next to the water. And the way that I've lived my life so far can be defined or characterized by 3 S's. The first is silence, the second is stillness, and the third is solitude. And every time I've achieved or lived in accordance with those 3 S's, my life has been fantastic. I want you to remember that. Now, me at the time, I believe I was 16, I definitely knew that was a message from the universe. For that to occur by happenstance, I don't believe in coincidences. So I took that on board. I never met that gentleman again. But such a statement, which is quite memorable, stuck with me. And the more that I reflected upon that, I realized its application in my life is incredibly powerful. So that is the Silver Man story. To bring us back into the concept of what I've just discussed and reflecting on boredom and silence, I'll quote Andrei himself. These are the best conditions to keep artistic cultures dead. There can be no creativity without silence and boredom, since the root of any creative undertaking lies in the ability to waste your time with elegance and style without feeling guilty. I love that. Thus, with an already depleted mental bandwidth due to technological overstimulation, and the inability to recuperate due to misunderstood conceptions of leisure, it is no wonder we are entering a societal collapse. Lackluster communication is merely one symptom of this collapse. So, with this picture in mind and firmly established, let's return to communication. Only now, let's consider the role of education. Most astute viewers would be aware of how the contemporary education system in most developed nations, and certain underdeveloped nations, is an industrial factory for the most part. Children are not given adequate opportunity to further any particular aptitude they may manifest to not only their teachers but their parents. As can be seen, the problem is that modern education is not really education. At the level of schooling, children don't know why they are there, they just know they have to be there. Or if they're really smart, they know being there will set them up for a good career. And the system established is one of passionless, disinterested groups of people occupying a room not by their own volition. Again, generally. And again, not permanently, I hope. The same can apply to university, with most institutions consisting of many purposeless individuals merely seeking safety, or the ingratiation of their parents' ideals, or pandering to those ideals of their surrounding social milieu. Compound this with communication mediums which encourage quick, sloppy verbal communication, and the predominant contemporary standard of communication surrounding children and tertiary students is considerably lackluster. As such, the inability of the education system to improve the state of communication shifts the responsibility of doing so onto the individual. So far, we've looked backward to understand the value that we're presently missing. We've examined the present to understand that the value is indeed missing. So now, let us gaze into the future to understand how we will reacquaint ourselves with this value. With the beauty of decentralization, we need to take charge and reinvent schools such that they capitalize on its beauty. This is where our individual responsibility enters. We need to make schools a place of voluntary interest where fees are viewed as token for opportunities to connect with like-minded students who each pursue a different interest area. If students don't know what their interest area is, there should be experimentation divisions. Teachers will be experts in their particular interest area and can be accessed across the globe, but will be fueled by passion and interest since they can work for themselves, monetize it, and also benefit students. Teachers must also go through a screening process and training to ensure they can imbue enthusiasm in students and foster their growth, not just sit there, regurgitate information, and receive a paycheck. Then, and only then, can there be an ethos of enthusiasm, curiosity, and creativity that will reignite the real education process once again. And the best part about this view? It's already happening. Consider the schools of Dan Coe, or Ali Abdaal, or Young to Live By. And if you choose to participate, this is how you shoulder your own responsibility. We are amidst the resurgence of value. Now, after what we've discussed, if you're left overwhelmed and slightly unsettled, I'll offer some practicable steps you can take to assist. We need to fill in the gaps and be the change we wish to see. Like-minded viewers, listeners, and readers, I implore you to take charge of your education, communication, and attention. And if you are a parent, it is of utmost importance that you be as involved in your child's education as you can, especially their life. So therefore, consider the following practicable steps to alleviate the collapse I've since discussed. First, read dated books. The books you'd cringe at for being too old or archaic or strange. Pay attention to the language present and emulate. If you want help on expanding your vocabulary, then you can read my article on the apps I use, as I mention how I use Apple Notes, RemNote, and Lookup to continually expand my vocabulary. And so you're not lost, I've compiled reading lists for which you can access for free in the description below. In the alternative to that, depending on your area, go to a large physical library and ask a librarian for books about your interest area. I say this because every lazy-bodied person will search online for them. Then they will read the same thing. Then they will think the same things. I want you to be different and unconventional. You can even go to thrift shops. Second, start a word bank and test yourself on it weekly. I've been keeping track of new words I derive from reading and from deliberate searching, such as language test prep books, and noting them down for 4 years now. I've then imported these into a RemNote database, which I then quiz myself on using an integrated flashcard system, which improves memory and retention of the words using active recall. I also require written text answers and custom examples, so I'm engaging in that recitation process. This is one of the methods I use to improve my vocabulary. If this interests you and you'd like to learn more about how I have structured it, you can learn more about how to do that in the article of mine which discusses the apps I use, which is also linked in the description. The third step is to record yourself speaking your thoughts every day or week. In doing so, you'll identify your filler words like a sore thumb and be traumatized by hearing both your own voice and those fillers, and ultimately reduce their occurrence. I do this on my walks or my fasted walks for several reasons. First, ideas come to mind when I walk, but I don't like typing. So, I record a voice note, which then magically gets imported into an automation system, whereby using the beauty of AI, it summarizes the audio recording, develops a transcript, and imports it into my Notion database. Second, walking magically brings out those stored mental tasks that I like to purge for greater clarity. And third, I'm speaking, which is considerably important for actioning all the reading, word training, and thought improvements that you should be doing. Now, if you're interested in understanding the system I use for transcribing my thoughts through a voice note and importing that into a Notion database, I've linked a useful resource in the description below. For those who know me, I'm sure they would have understood that I would not have omitted this. The fourth is journal, and not in the ordinary way. To learn more about that, please watch my video on how to journal for conscious and unconscious clarity for context. I say this because journaling clears the mind, offers an opportunity to practice new words like Schadenfreude, and when you do it the way I do, provides insights as to your personal growth, emotional tendencies, and repressed beliefs when reviewed in hindsight. I use a journaling app called Day One. I set it up with particular templates that make it a greatly optimized system for me, and also have a review system and planner to track my growth. I've created a custom journaling template that fuses the maximization of potential with psychology and self-improvement to ensure you can actually gain something useful from your journaling, because I have myself, so I thought I'd share it with you. If you're interested in that, please check the description. The fifth point is embody a lifestyle that appreciates and cultivates beauty, art, meaning, and creativity. Be the person who books tickets to an art exhibition. Be the person who gifts a book. Be the person who tapes 50 pages of words onto their walls. Guilty of that. Be the person who seeks out a book club or creates their own. Be the change you wish to see. We're entering a societal collapse. In values, in individuality, in principles, and in character, to name a few. I've created this episode in the hope that it acts as the stepping stone for reclaiming the wisdom and value in life that our ancestors so effortlessly practiced and understood. That it imbues within a parent or a child a deep-seated desire to achieve more, starting with their communication, their education, and their outlook on sourcing quality. That it awakens a person to the horrid standards of modern society in terms of language, lifestyle, communication, education, individual control, and leisure. But ultimately, I've created this episode in the hopes that you work towards reclaiming that which we've lost, by shining a light on what was to attain what will be, and to foster a world we can be proud of.